Douglas, what are you doing? Come on, Douglas, what are you doing? In today's video, we're going to talk about what I'm doing to rebuild East Augusta. Now, I've had some problems in this area here, number one being the radius of the track at the entrance to the bridges over the Water Street. And then I also had a vertical curve on a curved turnout in the East Augusta side, so these have really been an operational problem since I finished it. And I just haven't had the time, or I haven't had the energy, or I haven't felt like doing anything about it. But during this last set of layout operating sessions, it became apparent to me that this had to be redone. So we'll talk about how I looked at this, why I'm doing it, and where we're going with East Augusta as I put the new design back in and put it together. In this overhead view of the Augusta area, you can see Water Street, which is the edge of the bench work, and then it goes underneath those bridges. The curve that I had a problem with is the one I just showed you there that is less than 24 inches, and I designed this thing with 30 inches, at least on paper. And then we have the bridge going across there, which is where we had a lot of problems with equipment hitting the bridge girders as it was going through. Here I am illustrating the curvature and what it should be. There's a 36-inch curve radius gauge that I use to draw the actual lines on the layout when I'm building it, and obviously that curve's much tighter than that. Here I have a 30-inch radius gauge, and you can see where the track should have gone, and you can also see that what I did lay was a lot sharper because I started the curve too late and ended it up in a bad spot. So this is one part of it, what we're correcting to make this operationally better. And here is problem two. I have a curved turnout and I have a drop of about 1 inch from where that track starts at the edge of the bench work down to the other end of that curved turnout. So not only do I have a curved turnout, I have a vertical curve in the turnout, and this was causing some cars to derail, and it also made cars hitting the points have problems in locos. So poor choice doing that when I did it. I should have just basically raised the whole thing at that point instead of doing what I did, which was cutting the woodwork and raising it up and putting that curve in there, that vertical curve. And here I am with that 30-inch radius curve template that I used for drawing it. And so the curve itself wasn't bad. It was just the vertical portion of the curve which is really causing the operational problems, which we wanted to fix. At the other end of the section, I also had a vertical curve and a straight switch. Now, this really didn't cause any derailment or interference problems, but again, I had a switch that was in a vertical plane curved, and it just was, needed to be corrected. So these are all the problems with the East Augusta that required me to basically rethink it and redo it. So here I've started the demolition by ripping off the fascia cover, which was basically 4-inch floor mold in the plastic type that you see in most commercial buildings. But basically it comes in white. I glue it up here and then I paint it, and it makes a pretty good fascia. Here I've removed the basically the out-on section where the bridge was attached to that portion of the layout. That's been taken down. Here's me starting to rip out the track and the switches and stuff like that. None of the switches were glued to the cork road bed. They were all spiked, but all the actual trackage is glued to the cork road bed. After going through this process of disassembly, I think I won't glue track to cork road bed anymore. I'll use rail spikes. You don't see them anyway in most cases, and it just makes it a little cleaner if you're going to make a revision like I'm doing right now. So here was a decision point. I'm actually measuring the width of the bench work here, and it was 12 inches. I'm actually going to make it 18 inches on the new bench work, and I looked at that, and I'm looking down below at East Brunswick Yard trying to figure out how much I can actually overhang it to give it a little more space in the upper level. Here I've finally removed the bench work. Now you can see the L brackets that held it up. Bought these at Home Depot. They've worked real well. The whole upper level is supported by them. I'm going to build a new bench work, and then I'm going to shim it up high enough on these. I'm not going to change the position of the L brackets they are right now. Now, as you look in the background there, you can see those buildings that were glued to the backdrop. Those will stay there. These will actually be a little bit behind most of the structure that's going to go in front of it, but rather than take them off the wall, which would tear them all up, I just decided to leave them there. So what they do show will show. What doesn't show will be behind the structure that'll be on the fascia or the backdrop. It's still going to be narrow, so there's not going to be a whole lot of building there, but sorry to see these not be able to be recovered, but they're glued pretty hard and they won't just come off. So there we have it. We have the benchwork laying on the floor there. Had to take it apart in various different pieces and parts, and but it did get off. And now we've got a clean slate to start building the new portion of the East Augusta on the redesign. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about how I went about designing this East Augusta branch. So this is kind of how I've done it most of my life, but one of the first things I do is because I'm doing the Maine Central, I have the track diagrams. So in this track diagram here, you can see East Augusta. You can see how the track is around Statler tissue and stuff like that. So I just take that and I kind of use that to draw up a track plan. And this time around, obviously I can't, with the space I have, design exactly that track plan. So I come up with some sketches. And the bottom sketch here is kind of where I started at, where I thought I was going to, or how I was going to lay the track out. But even with this, I'm going to eventually go and when I start laying the track out and having the buildings I'm going to use, I'm reusing the buildings I did before, I'll actually modify this track diagram. Now, this whole layout I built was built using basically this type of graph paper and just basically measurements. Each block is 1 square foot on the graph paper. It's 11 by 17, and I designed the layout in 4-foot sections because I built it in 4-foot sections. So, but I always done it this way. I haven't got in. I bought the CAD program one time to do track layout, but the learning curve is so long, and I really enjoy drawing it this way. And then, if I get really along and I really like the design, I'll actually go ahead and you can see down here I put where I'm going to have trees and the actual buildings, and there's the propane tanks, and so these are the structures I had that I'm putting on there. So now I actually add scenery details. So right here, this dotted line is the second main that was basically removed, and but I'll leave some track simulating that as I do the layout scenery. The next thing we'll look at is the tools I actually use to build the layout and lay it out in wood. So obviously this is a 1x3 construction in the upper level. The lower level was all 1x4 construction, and it's basically just a box girder. So you have every 2 feet or so I put a cross member in here. And on the upper level I actually put flat 1x3s under here, and that's what hangs on the L brackets that are mounted to the wall. On the lower level it's actually mounted straight to the wall, and then there's legs on it. And then the top I put 1/2-inch plywood. And then you also see that I use cork road bed. I've always used cork road bed. A lot of people like to use the gray, I can't even think of the hell the name of it is right now. Anyway, it's the 1/2-inch, 3/4-inch thick Homosote. That's what I'm thinking about, Homosote. A lot of people use Homosote. I don't like Homosote because I don't like the dust it generates, and it actually is just such a mess that I just chose not to use it. And I mean, sawdust is bad enough, but Homosote's a whole nother level of dust. And so I use wood and I use the cork, and then I've used for scenery level that I want to bring up above this, I'll actually use foam blocks. And you get foam when you get stuff ordered through the mail, or you can buy the insulation, the pink foam or the blue foam at Home Depot. I'll use stuff like that to give texture up here. And if I want to put something below the track level, I'll actually physically cut down on the bottom level and brace it in the bottom so that I can put rivers in and stuff like that. So that's designed actually the box girder there, everything supports. And then the track, I use micro-engineering track. I've always used Atlas, but when I was looking at the track to build this layout, I decided to use micro-engineering. I like the looks of it. I like the way the switches snap operate. I've used Atlas and Payco and Shinohara and stuff like that. Payco I liked. Again, it has snap switches. And if you haven't figured out, I don't like electrical a lot, so I don't want everything to have a tortoise because I just don't enjoy that. So I like the switches that have the self-centering. And even if these things break, because occasionally when you're doing the track laying and ballasting, you may make one so that you get the spring messed up or something like that. There's a way of making them self-centering by putting a little L spring on the top of it. Maybe I'll show you guys that someday. But it's got a nice profile and it looks good. So I chose it for this layout, and I've used it throughout and been pretty pleased with it. When you first start using it to make curves, you have to kind of figure out how to make curves. It's not like Atlas Flex where you can just go like this and the stuff. It's very rigid, and so it makes it a little bit more difficult to do the curves. You can get a little block that you use for doing making the curves, and once you figure that out and learn how to do it, you can do it pretty good. And then the other thing that's essential when you do that, and I'm going to reach around behind the camera here, is have track gauges. Now, this right here is a 30-inch track gauge. I have 30, 36, 24. I think I have a couple other ones in there, 32 maybe, and stuff like that. So 30 inches was my minimum radius in the layout, so this was the track gauge that I used the most. But the other thing is, when I'm actually laying out the curves on the track, I have a large aluminum gauge. And if you've laid track and you're trying to figure out a curve, and you've got to go through the dynamics of using like a big protractor, using wood and pencils and stuff like that, it gets to be a pain in the ass. But with this, I can lay it down and mark up the curves, and obviously it tells you which side of this curve is a 30-inch center line. And you can't buy these anywhere. I ran a machine shop, and for training one day, I had a guy that was using a water jet and figuring out how to code the water jet. I had to make a whole bunch of these for me. So I have 30, 36, 24, and I think another 48-inch one. So I have a bunch of these big gauges that I can use to lay track outlines when I'm drawing it on the benchwork, and it's become very helpful. And here's a one for 36 inches. So that's how I lay it out on the wood, and then I actually have tools I use to take the track and put it in. So these are the tools I use for cutting the track. Obviously, you have your Xuron nippers, and these do a great job. I know some people like to use a Dremel model tool and stuff like that, but a Dremel tool, you need to wear safety glasses and stuff like that, because those cutting blades can shatter, and if you don't wear a face mask like that, you get hurt. So I use obviously a razor knife so I can cut the cork road bed. I got a chop pliers here. This is just for a cutting wire and stuff like that. But the other thing is, I have a jeweler's file, and this one sits in my track box, and I'll show you that real quick. I actually have a track laying box that has a bunch of tools, and it has rail joiners, spikes, and a couple of straight line gauges and stuff like that for laying track. So this is what I use all the time. But this particular jeweler's file is it's got a point on it here. It's got an angle in it, okay? So it's not a flat file, it's an angled file, but it's got the ability to use all edges of it to file, and I use that for cleaning up track. So a lot of times when you're cutting the track here, you get an edge on the bottom when you cut it, so you use this to clean that edge up in the bottom. I know you guys can't see that. Here we go. And then I also use the edge of it here to go in between the web of the rail and clean that up. And usually if I do that, I do a quick swipe, and then I do a quick swipe with a flat edge just to flatten out the joint, and it comes out pretty good. I can use track spikes to lay the track, and I always pre-drill with a little small drill. All the words are getting lost for me today. Sharpie for marking track center lines. And this time I'm using frog juicers for the turnouts. So the one thing nice about micro-engineering turnouts, they actually have a little spot down here at the bottom where you can solder in that wire for the frog juicer that goes to the frog. And they are insulated right here on each side, so they're already built for this for DCC. The other thing is, running the leads for the track. I use 22 gauge bell wire. Here's some that's already pre-cut. The other thing I do is I flatten the head. Let's see if I can see that. So I flatten that head, and when I run it down into the track, this head is flat, and that leans against the bottom of the rail, and that's what I
solder to the rail. Let's show that one more time here, geez. And I do that by taking the pair of the little needle nose pliers, and I basically use this flat spot right next to the jaw pivot point, and you can get a lot of force right there. And copper wire, it basically flattens out pretty good. And so the bell wire, you can go to Home Depot and places like that. And bell wire comes as two wires, red and white, and that's what my whole layout is done with red and white bell wire. The other thing is the main bus wire I use is 14 gauge, and it's red and white also. So using colors and using the same color for same things really helps out, making sure I don't make mistakes. Another thing you can use, and I don't have one here, you can use a buzz box where you actually put a outer clip on each side here. It has a little buzzer in it, and if you put the wrong wire to the wrong side of the rail, it'll buzz, letting you know you've made a mistake there. And that's about it. The track I spiked down. This time, almost all the rest of the layout I used brown RTV caulk to put the track down on the cork road bed. And the cork road bed, I use liquid nails for projects to glue the cork road bed. And I hold it down with push pins until it dries, and then I pull them up, and then I go ahead and lay the track. The caulk method works real well. But in this upper level here, you don't really see the spikes anywhere in there, so I'm just using the spikes, and I don't I didn't want to mess around with the caulk this time because it is a bit messy and it does take time. And here you can lay a lot of track just using spikes. The caulk, you have to lay track, put soup cans on it so it holds it down in place, and then you have to go walk away for a while and let it dry overnight. And when I was building the layout, I was doing a section at a time, so it wasn't too bad. But I have to say that this one right here, I'm wanting to get it back in service as soon as possible. So I've not gone to the caulk, although I could have, because I ran out of rail joiners in the middle of it and had to stop. But there we are. So just so you can see, almost all the track is laid in now. The only section I haven't laid in is the O'Connor scrap yard track. Now you'll notice right there that white is fast and final. I use fast and final for roads. I use it for anything where I need to have a type of a separation or some kind of mount. It dries pretty good. It's kind of my go-to thing right there. I use it to feather in the 1 1/4 inch plywood that comes from the helix up on top of this plywood. And then I use it actually for the incline. It comes down here, so there's about 1.5 feet of an incline there, because there's a slight difference in height between the helix plywood and the benchwork I put in here. And I'm using it for sealing spots, and then I also use it to fill in around where the track, the cork road bed meets, rather than trying to cut in and fit cork road bed. And you can see where all the feeders are coming up. Now right here, like I said, I had O'Connor scrap that needs to be done. There's a track that'll go off to the bridge. So I generally don't like switching puzzles, which is why I copy actual track diagrams, because I want something that was there. And in this area of East Augusta, there was one reverse switch, and I can't tell from the track diagrams or anything I've been able to find what was on the reverse switch, but I added in here, and the Kennebec journal will actually fit in right in here. And then down here will be Kennebec spirits or beverages. And then if you notice my plan, I've added an extra track in here, and this is the dry chemicals shed. And now Statler Tissue didn't need dry chemicals. They made tissue paper. They basically took pulp and scrap paper and then turned it into tissue paper. But I like having the hoppers here and having another car type to be put into the business. And then this track right here on the other side of the main line is chemical track, so they'll have tank cars or whatever on it for Statler. And then, you know, back here I have the 2 loading tracks for boxcars. And there's 2 doors right there, so there's space so I can put 50-foot boxcars in there. And then, you know, a lot of times they would have tracks in freight houses and stuff like that, where you had 2 tracks parallel, and you'd basically put a plate between them and load them. Probably not happening. It didn't happen at Statler Tissue, but in the case here, we will have basically boxcars get loaded through boxcars for this, because I didn't want to run track all the way down there like I did last time, because it's hard for operators to reach down there and couple and uncouple cars, because there's down here is where the Y is for Brunswick. So it proved to be difficult for the operators to do that. So 2 shorter tracks, and they'll put the box cars on these 2 shorter tracks. And then obviously we have the propane dealer, Suburban Propane. So at this point, I'm ready to start dropping the rest of the feeders. I've already drilled the holes down at this end. I'm kind of waiting for the glue to dry on the O'Connor cork road bed. And when that's done, I'll lay that piece of track. I'll drop all the feeders in, and then I will solder them to the track, and then I will start the process of attaching the feeders to the bus wire underneath here, and putting the Tam Valley frog juicers in. The green wires from the frog, and the red and white obviously is the 2 buses.